We have a lot coming up. Scott Pruitt and lotions and high salaries for his wife.
He likes fancy lotions.
Fancy they have, and lotions.
He likes. He makes.
That's coming up.
He makes his staff members drive all around Washington D.C. to find fancy lotion.
We have video of this lovely lady with her child asking him to resign, and I will second that request. Let's start this hour with dueling Washington Post columns. Joe writes...
Well, why don't we start with the Pulitzer Prize winner?
No. You write that while the American left is in a panic, now it's time to keep their heads. And you and I disagree on this a little bit. You say, quote, Camelot, this is not. I would agree with that. But neither are Trump's wretched displays of cruelty and ignorance dispositive proof of democracy's imminent demise. The president's twisted view of constitutional norms has rightly fueled fears on the left that the Madisonian model's future hangs in the balance. Such gathering storms inspire me from time to time to draw comfort from the sage insights of that American philosopher, Billy Hicks, as portrayed by Rob Lowe in the 1985 Brat Pack flick, St. Elmo's Fire. This isn't real. You know what it is? It's St. Elmo's Fire, electric flashes of light that appear in dark skies out of nowhere, Lowe told a whimpering Demi Moore while producing puffs of fire from aerosol cans lying conveniently around his feet. We're all going through this. It's our time at the edge. Many Democrats campaigning across the United States understand that now is no time to panic. Instead of being distracted by those electric flashes of light created by Trump's perpetual motion machine, they are knocking on doors, reaching out to neighbors, making Facebook friends, and organizing teams to drive their supporters to polling places. For those still distracted by the latest cable news calamity, remember the words of a union activist wrongly executed in 1915. Before his death, Joe Hill sent a friend instructions. Don't waste any time mourning. Organize. Good advice at this time.
And now you don't have to read the column because we could just do it.
Well, I thought it was really good. Jean's is really good, too.
Chapter 14.
No, but we need to actually take a longer time to reflect on what's really happening here.
Well,
and that's what this show does.
Well, and, you know, Sam, I've noticed in columns, on Twitter, in commentary, especially over the past 2-3 weeks, a lot of Democrats, a lot of left of center commentators, but going into despair. It's like, this is just too much. This is, everything's coming at us, and da-da-da. I've seen it, actually from...
You're talking about me.
Some gifted columnists and Mika Brzezinski and others who are overwhelmed. That's what Trump wants you to be, overwhelmed. I know you want a Nick Saban analogy.
Yeah, I do.
Alabama can be down by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And you know what the players are thinking about? The next play.
Sure.
He trains them. You just think about the next play. You don't look at the scoreboard. You don't care about the scoreboard. Look at the next play. Look at the blocking and tackling. And in this case, it's organize. Knock on doors. Put up yard signs. Get your team together for Election Day.
I think what's happened over the past 2 weeks, and maybe I'm overstating or overgeneralizing here, is 2 things that have really hit Democrats psychically hard. One is the separation policy, which has been morally difficult to comprehend for obvious reasons. And the second, I think, is the fact is Anthony Kennedy's retirement. And the reason that has been so psychologically debilitating for a lot of Democrats is that you have a case where the president lost the popular vote by 3 million votes, and will now have the ability to reshape politics for generations to come. Also, you have looming over all of this an ongoing investigation into whether he was legitimately elected or whether a foreign government interfered in this campaign, and the not so unreal possibility that later this summer we will be presented with fairly compelling truth that collusion did take place. And we'll have to wonder, well, should he have the right to appoint a replacement to the Supreme Court in that case? And I think this is very difficult for Democrats to comprehend, how they can live in a system in which this man did not get more votes, but will reshape American politics for decades. And so, to your point, what you can do about it is simple. There's only one thing you can do about it.
Right.
You can prepare for November. There are no other pressure points, really. There are no other ways to flip the script.
Right.
Even with respect to the Supreme Court battle.
Right.
It all comes down to putting on enough pressure to elected officials, specifically Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski, so that they vote no.
So, Michael Steele, it is also important for Democrats, instead of going back and trying to blame Vladimir Putin, I write about this in the column, or Susan Sarandon, or, I mean, you go down the list, the New York Times email stories, or you go down the list, Morning Joe, or you go down the list, whomever else they want. At the end of the day, Anthony Kennedy's retirement is going to move the court even more in a more conservative direction, because for the last 20 years, the Democratic Party, they have been losing their congressional majority with all the subtlety of a Hindenburg crash. And there are times when Donald Trump's abhorrent behavior leads to certain disturbances in the force in Washington. But sometimes things like Kennedy's retirement and the replacement of Kennedy with another conservative, that just happens because Republicans are in the majority and Democrats have forgotten how to win elections.
That's the bottom line. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of the Democrats, going back to even how they responded to Republicans pushing against the Obama administration, was one of, well, we're outraged, everybody should be outraged, and that's somehow translated in the votes. I'm sorry, it's not a substitute for what you note in the article, getting on the ground and organizing and getting out there and getting that vote to the polls. So to Sam's point, I appreciate that Donald Trump got 3 million fewer votes than Hillary Clinton, but that's not how we elect the president of the United States. I appreciate the fact that Democrats are now wailing and gnashing their teeth about the selection of yet another Supreme Court justice by this president. But you know what? Republicans made that the cause celeb. That was the #1 issue. And I don't know how Democrats were included into what this election would mean for the Supreme Court, what it would mean for other agencies. So all of this right now seems to be a little bit late to the game. And yet, to your point, Joe, on the ground, Democrats, away from the national structure, away from the party organization, are finding ways to win and push back against the system without making Trump necessarily the centerpiece of their anger and frustration, but rather the question about what kind of America we want to be.
I think we're going to find a lot of candidates that are going to be every bit as impressive as the 28-year-old woman who won in
Alexandria,
Queens. Alexandria, who won in Queens. I know a lot of people in Fox and other, a lot of people, conservative commentators, freaking out because she's so far left of center. Guess what's going to happen? In the heartland, if this is a wave election, you're going to have women who used to be pilots in the Air Force that retired and are running as conservative to moderate Democrats who are going to win as well. That's what happens in years such as these. But, Mark Leibovich, again, I talk about organizing because everybody has this view of Barack Obama as, as he said, I'm LeBron, baby. Guy can shoot. Yeah, I mean, the guy can do whatever LeBron could do on the basketball court, he could do on the campaign trail. And he was extraordinary. But as we found out with LeBron this past year, sometimes just having LeBron ain't enough to win the championship. The most impressive thing about Barack Obama's campaigning to me wasn't his speeches, it was who he put around him. And they were just natural-born killers politically. They kept their heads down. They didn't get frustrated. They knew what they needed to do to win, and they went out and organized. Back in 2007, I remember reading a New York Times article talking about all the money that Barack Obama was bringing in. And when I saw that he was investing it in the ground game in Iowa, I was like, whoa. Mm-hmm. All right, this ain't going to be Howard Dean's 2004 campaign. They've learned.
Right, although I do think it's worth pointing out that Barack Obama's organizing machine worked very much and very sort of singularly in the service of Barack Obama. It didn't do a lot to to bring up other Democrats. I mean, they had some disastrous midterm elections, and I think what we're seeing now is there's not a lot of seed corn in the Democratic Party. It's all sort of starting organically over the last several months. But Barack Obama was it has turned out to be a pretty sui generis phenomena, and again, it sort of remains to be seen whether Democrats can get that going again. I mean, I think at this point the rolling news and the rolling despair can be a distraction to what you said in your column.
Yeah, or they can be lessons learned.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.